Now, from the 1970s, domestic demand for petroleum products continued to rise, but then domestic capacity to meet local demand continued to fall. It then got to a point where our refineries could just barely manage between 15 and 25% capacity utilization. That then raised the need for us to import to complement for what we could produce. So the marriage between rising domestic demand and falling domestic production capacity was what exposed us to the idea of subsidy in the first place. Because in the 1970s, around 1973, there was this oil price rise in the international market. Ordinarily, if we could produce our own, if we could meet our local demand, we wouldn't have been affected by international oil price. But international oil price affected Nigeria in 1973 because we were importing petroleum products. And as a result, government decided to keep the prices stable within the local market by paying the difference. That is simply what subsidy is. And that's how subsidy started. They felt that it worked then because it worked for the common man, that's true. But it didn't encourage the government then to begin to beef up their own local capacity. So rather than do that, they felt we had so much money, we didn't know what to do with it. So they continued to pay the difference. In 1977, they promulgated a law or an act. They said it's called the Price Control Act. That law then made subsidy legal in Nigeria. So they could regulate prices of goods. Whatever goods they considered as priority goods, they had the power to regulate the prices. Now, one of the ways you can regulate price, or better still, the only way you can regulate the price of my goods if I was selling something is that you make sure you cover for my profit and my capital. So you cannot force me to sell at a loss because you are government. What you can do is to pay the difference when you work out whatever cost I used to produce and my profit margin. You can eat into a little of my profit margin, but that's the best you can do. So that's exactly what government did. They went into deals with petroleum marketers and said, we'll pay the difference. You just tell us, be honest about whatever you imported. We'll pay the difference so that people can get them at a particular rate that we will fix. So the promulgation of the Price Control Act in 1977 got subsidy rooted in the Nigerian system. And from then on, corruption continued to grow in that system. And then in the 90s, they said subsidy was supposed to be put in place for 6 months just for us to do some sort of maintenance on our refineries. And 6 months became 24 years. Fuel importation had continued unabated. Our refineries did not produce a drop of petrol or any other goods for that matter for more than a decade. So we resorted to 100% importation of petroleum products, which made our bill for subsidy to skyrocket. Don't forget, we had a growing population as well. So population growth led to increase in demand. Then corruption in the system escalated that even further to a point where the economy was struggling to handle fuel subsidy. We were spending money per year on fuel subsidy that we could have spent to build brand new refineries. So it was like the economy was bleeding. There was a flesh wound rotting with maggots, infested with maggots, infected and infested with maggots, with blood. And successive governments have been tying bandages on that wound. That's exactly the analogy I can use to describe the Nigerian economy. It took the combined effort of the last two administrations, or the current administration and the last one, to make that strong decision to remove fuel subsidy. I think it got to a point where they had to resort to do it the hard way. If we started the process of removal of fuel subsidy from 1999, we could have used what I call a tapered approach. You grow domestic capacity and then you gradually reduce amount of imported products. You get to a point where domestic capacity balances with domestic demand, and then you don't ban importation, you simply withdraw your subsidy. And then if an importer feels that he can still import, if the business makes sense, in terms of profit and loss and whatever he thinks in his business, he can carry on importing. So you don't need to ban anybody's business, importation business. That approach would have worked perfectly if we started it from 1999 civilian regime up till today. Within that regime, they said Nigeria was going to turn into a net exporter. They had a lot of glamorous promises, but where are we today? So if you ask me if the common man enjoyed petroleum subsidy, the answer is yes. But petroleum subsidy severely hurt our economy. We went on to subsidize currency, subsidize different things in our economy. And it landed us in this deep hole that we are in today. We've lost the window that we could have used the tapered approach. That's to be honest. But even where we are now, there's hope. We have this 650,000 barrels per day capacity refinery that is ready to go. Dangote's refinery was built within about 7 years. Say under 10 years, and that's 650,000 barrels per day. That just shed the light. If our local refineries, the ones that are already moribund, have been or are revived, and then just imagine that within the next 10 years, we're able to build 500,000 barrels per day refineries, in addition to what we have already. You can see that going into the future, Nigeria would have developed enough local refining capacity. And you're being able to refine enough product to meet your local demand and even export. Nigeria will be a net exporter of petroleum products. Do you know that that is one of the main foundations of Nigeria's economic success in the long run? If we're able to pull this off within the next 10 years, we'll be in a much better place economically. Now, are we supposed to build another government refinery? Are we supposed to use Dangote's model? Or are we supposed to use the build, operate, and transfer model? Or the public-private partnership model? The problem with the public-private partnership model was that governments, not just in Nigeria, but in many African countries, have usually been negligent when it comes to contributing their own counterpart funding, and that had brought a lot of projects to crash. Now they've come up with this innovative approach where they say build, operate, and transfer. I have a slight issue with that because the consensus right now is that, oh yes, build, operate, and transfer is working. It's in stages. Build, private sector. Operate, private sector. When they transfer it to government, then what? Then we come back to the age of low capacity utilization, low maintenance, poor whatever training. They are not able to manage the plant, and it goes down again. And then they scrap it and they sell it. I don't think in the long run, build, operate, and transfer as it is now will work for us. Which is why I would propose build, operate, and concession. So you don't just stop at transferring it back to government ownership. You transfer it back to government ownership and immediately concession it to a reputable firm that can run the facility. Say, for example, you build a 500,000 barrels per day capacity refinery. So Shell comes in and builds that, or Mobil comes in and builds that, or any private operator comes in and builds that. When you finish building it, you uprun it for the amount of time agreed with government. And then government comes in to assume ownership. So you're transferring ownership with all the technical skill transfers that you've done that is contained within your agreement. But then you apply for a concession. Government comes and asks the operator, do you want to continue to run this plant? The answer is yes or no. If they want to run it, they will submit a bid, and then one or two other companies will submit bids. Government will look at it and say, well, based on the bids that you submitted, this is the person that we are concessioning this plant to. So concession is done based on merit. If the company that built the plant has operated it optimally and delivered a lot of profit and all that, if they have a good service record and good relationship with our country, with our labor laws and all that, we have no problem allowing them to continue to run that facility on behalf of the government as concession. For me, that's what is going to work in the long run. The second option would be have the private sector develop, build, operate, run, own, but let government buy shares in that particular company, own equity in that particular company. So government can buy shares in every major company in Nigeria. By that, they have investment. They begin to earn return on their investment year upon year. As these businesses grow, money flows into government's coffers. In addition to the taxes that they will realize from these businesses, you don't have anything to lose with that. I'm not in support of government going to run any facility. As government, it has proven that it doesn't work for us. I'd say government should buy shares from these companies, from private operators who have the capacity to run this sort of projects. Looking into Nigeria's long-term future, we can change a lot in 10 years. We can generate enough power in 10 years. We can refine enough fuel in 10 years. We can produce enough food in 10 years. We can change the economic landscape of Nigeria in 10 years. I've done videos on some of these topics I just mentioned. Nigeria's economic revival, to a very large extent, can be achieved within the life of one administration, which is 8 years. But it takes a great deal of commitment, a great deal of work. If we have 2 government cycles, 16 years, absolutely lovely. Even better for us. But it's not what we're saying now, it's what we're doing that will determine that success that we're talking about. But the message here is it's very possible. It's very achievable. It's very much within our grasp. Subsidy removal was done in the best way possible. We could do it now because it's too late already. But going into the future, let's not find ourselves here again. Let's begin to produce for Nigeria's future. Let's begin to produce into Nigeria's future. But we can turn this country around in under 20 years. Thank you very much. This is Discourse, and my name is Azubike. Thank you for watching this video.